All right, welcome everybody to today's live webinar, Reintroducing the World's Best SSL VPN. Just a quick overview of today's agenda. So, I see some people on today's webinar that I'm familiar with, some customers, some partners, but also see a lot of new names. So I want to go ahead and build an awareness and just give a very, very brief overview of Array Networks as a company for those of you that might be new to Array Networks, and then we'll go ahead and dive into the content of today's webinar, which is why Array remains the world's best SSL VPN. And we'll go into this in greater detail, but a lot of it has to do with the scalable and flexible platform options that we make available, the end-to-end security, importantly, the flexible access methods that we have on our product, the ability to do remote and mobile access, and we're even going to go into things like cloud access as well, right? So that ability to do very robust, very broad capability in supporting, different use cases, and some of the use cases that we're seeing more and more these days. And then, with this enterprise class SSL VPN platform, the ability to do custom virtual portals, which is something that, really is unique to Array and sets us apart. And so that's very product-centric, right? And then we want to pivot and talk a little bit about the key Array SSL VPN use cases, right? So where can you put all these things that we do, that we differentiate on? Where can we put those things to use to benefit you as a customer? So some of those are going to be limiting network exposure, which is becoming more and more important. But then touching on enterprise remote access, improving the end user experience, and also one that I mentioned earlier, which is remote cloud access, right? So SSL VPN or VPNs in general, they started out, worker productivity, allowing your remote workers, mobile workers, any worker at this point to, have remote mobile access to business networks, business applications, things of that nature. But with the advent of the cloud and these remote data centers, private clouds, public clouds, and the need to have secure access into those to manage services, applications, infrastructure, things of that nature, we're seeing that VPNs are having this new use case, this new application. So we want to touch on that as well. So those are the topics that we're going to dive into today. So just a little bit of housekeeping, again, before we get started. My name is Paul Anderson. I'm a Senior Director of Marketing here at Array Networks. I'm going to be leading the majority, if not all, of today's webinar. And the way we're going to do this is, if you have questions along the way, I'm not going to stop every couple minutes and field questions, but what I encourage you to do is, if you have a question on a particular slide, a particular topic, go ahead and just put those into the Q&A window or into the chat window within the WebEx portal. Either one will do. We're going to kind of open those up and look through those as we get to the end. So if you have a question, go ahead and type that in, right? That way we don't get to the end and, hey, I had a question. Oh, I forgot my question, right? The other thing, too, is we have those questions that we kind of build up along the way. It gives a chance at the end for those that, might have a question. They can go ahead and enter those in at the end while we're answering some of the questions that have come in along the way. So go ahead and do that, and we should be all good. And hopefully, if I can get through the material in a reasonable amount of time, we'll save, 5, 10, or more, depending as we need it, minutes at the end to be able to field those questions. So just a very quick background about Array Networks. So we are headquartered here in Milpitas, California, so in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and have been here for quite a while. I've been in operation for a number of years, right? Good-sized organization with probably just about 250 or so employees. But as you can see over on the right there, the markets that we serve, the North America and Europe markets, China markets, Japan, India, and others, it's a global operation. So we have about 250 or so employees, but they are spread across, those markets that I just mentioned, with various sales organizations, support organizations, development organizations, and so on and so forth. In terms of our technology, right, I won't go into too much detail here, but, there are a lot of vendors that, just kind of leverage a lot of open source stuff and slap a logo on it, and it's kind of me too and same as everybody else, and we really differentiate on having a strong intellectual property portfolio, technology portfolio, that we develop a lot of these capabilities and things that you see that we're going to be able to do. You know, we take the time to develop those, and that allows us to differentiate on them. The focus, this is really interesting, right? So the topic of today's conversation is going to be SSL VPN. You know, we've been doing it for a long time. We have a very solid product offering on VPN. But if you go to our website, you're going to see some new stuff there, right? And there's some very interesting things that we're doing in terms of virtualization and how we're helping to solve some of the challenges that are being faced by customers as they look to more and more deploy these kinds of functions, whether it be the SSL VPN function, the load balancing and ADC function, WAN optimization, web app firewall, next-gen firewall. More and more, they're looking to become more software-centric and deploy these things as virtual appliances in order to be more responsive to the needs of their internal customers or external customers, right? To be more cloud-like, more agile, you know, have CapEx, OpEx savings, things of that nature, right? But there are things that are preventing organizations from, you know, going down that road as much as they might like to, right? There are things like, hey, it's new, it's complex. Hey, I've got questions around performance issues, SLAs, things of that nature that I know my hardware appliances could meet, but, you know, I'm not so sure about my software, right? So there's some very interesting things that we're doing. We have some other webinars on our YouTube site that go in depth on that, and we have other webinars coming up where we're going to touch more on that. So just know that. Our focus is, you know, virtualized app delivery and security. And within that, we have the product lines, right? We have the network functions platform. It's the new solution where we're enabling some of the stuff that I just described. But then we still have, you know, the product lines that we've been developing over a number of years. The ADC product line, the SSL VPN product line we're going to talk about today. We have a couple more as well, the WAN optimization and so on and so forth. So, you know, within that layer 4 through 7 application level services, we have a very strong portfolio. Segments that we service, the traditional enterprise and public sector government organizations, and, you know, you name it, banking, financial services, insurance, healthcare, education, all these kinds of things. I've been doing that for a while. And of course, within service provider, and particularly cloud service provider, is something that's coming on very strong over the last probably 4 or 5 years at this point. You know, with cloud providers that want to offer infrastructure services, application services, things of that nature. And so that's, over time, become grown to become an increasing portion of our overall business. I touched on our markets already, and I mentioned as well that, you know, hey, you know, we're doing some new stuff now, solving some new challenges, but the truth is we've been in business for a number of years, and over that time have amassed quite a number around the world of satisfied customers. I think at this point, last count, over 5,000. So you can see some of those customers down below, some of the awards, some recent awards, things of that nature. It just gives you a good overall picture of Array Networks as a company. So let's take a closer look at the SSL VPN product line. So again, yeah, so this is a little bit of reiteration of what I mentioned, and I talked about the network functions platform, which is the product that a lot of the new things that we're doing in that area of solving challenges around virtualization and NFV and things of that nature. Those are things that are being handled by our network functions platform product that you can see on the left. Our load balancer or application delivery controller product, you can kind of see that there. And the WAN optimization product you can see. And I've kind of shaded those out a little bit just to emphasize that the product line that we're going to be talking about today is what we call our AG series, our SSL VPN secure access gateways. And one of the things you can see, even just looking at this picture, right, is that, yeah, if you have, you know, if your requirement is such that the physical appliance is going to serve you best, might be because of performance, might be scalability, might be you just like hardware. I don't know. We have them, and you'll see more about that. Or you might say, hey, you know what, I'm on this path of virtualization, and the requirements of my particular deployment scenario is a great fit for the software, and that's the direction I want to go. We have that as well, and that's indicated by that the little graphic that you see there on top of the hardware appliance. So that's where we're going to be focusing today. And another preface that I want to make is, you know, what we're seeing when we look at the SSL VPN market, there's really kind of three things three deployment models or three ways to buy that we see out there. And a lot of times the people that end up coming to us come to us because they tried one or two of these other approaches and then have found that, hey, you know what, I have a more robust SSL VPN requirement, and then they'll come to Array Networks and take a look at our products and so on and so forth. So one of the things we see out there is that, yeah, you know what, or sometimes we'll talk to customers and say, hey, do you want an SSL VPN? And they'll say, oh, you know what, I have an SSL VPN. It's built into my firewall, right? So this is kind of one of those things where it's like, oh, it's not a product per se, it's an integrated feature. So SSL VPN provided as an integrated feature on a firewall type product, right? And so we see that out there. And one of the things is that it tends to be that it's implemented as a bit of an afterthought, right? So it's not bad, and it's sufficient for, let's say, light or limited use, right? But if somebody starts to say, hey, I have a particular use case, particular project, particular application, and I want to, really provide secure remote access for this thing, and then they go to that feature on their firewall and try to use it, they very quickly find out that, like, yeah, it was just tacked on. Right? It's really not going to solve my problem, right, or whatnot. So this is one thing that we see out there, right? The other one that we sometimes see out there is what I kind of call it the SMB appliance, right? It's the very simple, self-contained, kind of a small desktop appliance or clamshell type thing, and absolutely, right, it has its time and place. If I'm I'm a small business, I have like 10 to 15 people that, yeah, at some point in time they're at home, they need to log in, it's fine. But it's sufficient for that basic VPN requirement at a smaller organization, but not really suitable for the more demanding enterprise or service provider type use cases, right? So these are the two things what we see out there. And hey, you know what? They're not bad. They have their use cases. But what happens is that, a business has a new initiative or a new requirement, and they try to get the job done with one of these two, and, very quickly run up against it just doesn't have the horsepower, number one, to give the throughput for the user experience. It doesn't have the scalability to support the number of users. It doesn't have the feature robustness to support, and we'll get more into that, right? So the third category, and it's the category that Array falls into, is the purpose-built product or the purpose-built appliance, right? And I put hardware here, but you'll see all the features I'm going to talk about are included in our software version as well. But the point being that the product itself is purpose-built to be an SSL VPN. That's what it does, right? And it's designed to do that job extremely well for when you have a use case that, this is a key element of it. So it provides the performance, scalability, flexibility, richness of features needed to support enterprise and service provider type requirements. It's not to say that it can't, hey, you know what, we have plenty of mid-market customers as well that just love the product. But if you're an enterprise or a service provider, this is more than likely the type of product that you want to be looking at. And this is not comprehensive by any means, but I tried to distill it, and these are the things I'm going to touch on in the presentation. What are those things that make our product fall into that purpose-built SSL VPN type category? And this covers like 90% of it, right? So scalable and flexible platform options, physical and virtual appliances, and we can go anywhere from 25 all the way up to 128,000 concurrent users. That's a little theoretical on the 128,000 concurrent users, but the point is I like to make the analogy of, a stereo amplifier, right? You get a really good one and it's got, I don't even know how many watts, lots of watts, and you're like, no one's going to listen to that loud. But the point is that when you put it on half or a third, the quality is so much better, right? So let's say I only needed to do 20,000 users, which is still a big enterprise use case, or 30,000 users. The point being is they get tremendous throughput. They get tremendous user experience because the product has such capacity. End-to-end security, right? It's data, it's security for data at rest and also security for data in motion. So it starts all the way out at the endpoint with all the checks that we do on the client through to data in motion, the encryption of the connection, all the way to the server-side security where we do, the deep packet inspection and provide a built-in web firewall on the product. So end-to-end security and very robust security at each point in the process. Remote and mobile access. So it's not enough today to say, hey, I support whatever, remote access from a laptop or a desktop at someone's home. There's a proliferation of devices out there, whether it be the tablets, the smartphones, laptops, desktops, all the different operating systems, all the different types of manufacturers and whatnot, and we support a very wide variety of those, right? And that's important for when you're looking at things like even BYOD, right? Some people don't like BYOD, but if you get into that game, you have to be able to support the range of appliances that you're going to run into when you try to do that type of thing. Custom virtual portals. This is when you do get into things like enterprise and service provider, what happens is you get different communities of interests. You get different internal departments, and they have their own look and feel and applications. Different customers, they have their own desire for a look and feel and a process and different resources that they're accessing. Guests, partners, contractors. How do you give them each the experience and the resources that they're authorized to have? And so these custom virtual portals we're going to touch on, this is one of those areas where we just really pull ahead in terms of what we're able to do for companies. And then the flexible access methods, and we're going to talk more about, so we do things like obviously the network level connectivity, but layer 4 connectivity, RDP access, access to virtual applications, virtual desktops, web-based access, all these types of things. So we cover all of them. We run the gamut there. And I'm going to touch on why that's important in just a little bit. So I talked about the scalable and the flexible platform options. I don't need to spend too much time on it here. It's just to make the point that, well, a couple points I suppose I can make here. One is that the operating system that we use or the image that we use for our SSL VPN, it's consistent, okay? So whether you have a virtual edition that you've deployed on the hypervisor of your choice in a private cloud or a virtualized server, or you're buying the product, let's just say on AWS, or you have an entry-level hardware appliance, or you have a high-end appliance, it's all the same code, right? So for instance, if you bought into, I don't know, an AG 1100 and your requirements grow, you can just take the config you have, get a new appliance, reapply the config, back in business with just a lot more headroom, right? If I have a hybrid type environment, the config that I have in my data center on a hardware appliance is the same config that I have in the cloud, right? So not only do you get a lot of flexibility, a lot of scalability, a lot of future-proof, you get a lot of consistency as well. So regardless of the deployment model and what your use case or what your goals are, we have those products that can to help get you where you need to be. Even including the FIPS products, right? So if it's a federal type opportunity, a higher security standards, we have stuff that's going to get you covered. End-to-end security. So I touched on this a little bit earlier. But here you kind of, and it's a bit of an eye chart here, and but yeah, in terms of the endpoint security, right? You get everything, the pre-authentication, the host checking, the adaptive policies. So depending on what the endpoint discovers, we change what we make available. Oh, you're in an unknown location. Well, we give you something different, or we restrict your access methods. A lot of stuff that goes on there at the endpoint to make sure that before you even connect, that everything looks good. Once you connect, you see only what you're supposed to see. Once you disconnect, we wipe everything to make sure that we don't have any data leakage, things of that nature. So endpoint security. The SSL encryption, right? So, this is protecting that data in motion. One of the things that I like to point out is I talked earlier about the fact that we developed a lot of our own technology, right? And so our SSL stack that we implement that protects this data in motion, that's a proprietary SSL stack. We developed that ourselves, number one, primarily because we wanted to get higher performance, which it did achieve, But the other thing we did is it's not like these open SSL or other open protocols where, everybody has visibility to it and, can go ahead and try to take their best shot at cracking it, right? And you've seen a lot of like Heartbleed, Ghost, Shell Shock, Bash, Drown, a number of these vulnerabilities that have come out that have kind of hampered SSL protocols and have caused a lot of patching and a lot of headache for people. Our customers haven't had to deal with any of that. No patching, no remediation, nothing, because the SSL stack was more secure, and it simply wasn't affected, right? So a great example right there. And then, the advanced AAA, I'm not even going to get into all this. It's quite extensive, but we have, tons of partnerships in terms of authentication, dual factor, multi-factor, cloud-based authentication, you name it. We've got those partnerships, we've got those deployment guides, we've got those use cases out there. The web firewall, so, hey, we've authenticated you, and but now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the activity and the traffic and the applications, right, and dig in there and make sure that, there's no sort of activity, right, that we don't want. And then the fact that it is a reverse proxy, right, so we actually terminate the connection, and if, for whatever reason, the activity or the application or the traffic is not legit or is malicious, then you're never even going to be connected to that back-end resource, network, server, application, you name it, because there's a gap. We terminate, we make sure it's okay. If it's okay, then you go on the established connection to the back-end resource, and so we have that separation as well. So it's full end-to-end, security, and it's the kind of thing that when I say the integrate, where SSL VPN is an integrated feature, or where SSL VPN is a very basic box. This is the depth and the richness of features that you're not going to see on those types of products. So talk a little bit about this starts to talk a little bit about the access methods, but it's also the product modules or what's available for our product. And it doesn't matter whether you buy the virtual or you buy the physical appliance. These are generally how we package up our the product software modules that you can buy for the product. So we have what we call Access Direct, and this is really the foundation or the fundamental component of the product. It gives you almost, I would say it gives you 80% of the product, 85% of the product, and it really does everything. It does the traditional web or network level VPN for remote workers. It gives you all that security and everything I described on the previous slide. That all kind of rolls into Access Direct. Desktop Direct, this is, we don't probably have time to really go into detail on Desktop Direct and all the unique features of this product, but it is designed for extremely ease of use, right? So whether you're the end user or you're the IT administrator, it's designed to give remote desktop access and also access to virtualized desktops and virtualized applications using the layer 4 thin client, but doing so in a way to where you could set up thousands of users very easily for remote desktop type applications and just save a ton of time and hassle and so on and so forth, both for the IT manager and for the end user in terms of remote desktop type applications. Motion Pro is our client. It's what gets installed. It doesn't matter whether you have a desktop, laptop, tablet, smartphone, etc. The client that we use, we call it Motion Pro, and it's really where we get into a lot of the features and capabilities we have for supporting secure mobility. So securely connecting devices and apps to enable business mobility and BYOD. And finally, not really a product, more in terms of licensing and allowing people to cost-effectively support the type of user base that they use on an ongoing day-to-day basis, but have a very cost-effective and easy process for times when there are, we're here in, in California, in the Bay Area, right? We have a lot of these, right now we have the Napa fires and we have a lot of stuff going on, right, that's preventing people from getting into the office, doing things of that nature. And so there's a big kind of ramps up that need for remote and mobile access because, hey, I can't go work the way I normally would. In that case, you would apply these business continuity licenses and they would immediately bump up for a period of time the number of users that can log in and work remotely. And we make those licenses available very cost effectively because we know that they only get applied in case of emergency. So let's talk a little bit about Access Direct, which is, like I mentioned, is the primary, is 80% of the product, right? So we offer this pure SSL, anytime, anywhere, browser-based access, so that's that layer 7 access. With Access Direct, you get up to 256 virtual instances to support multiple communities of interest, right? The business unit, partners, guests, contractors, things of that nature. Again, it's one of those things, right? 256 sounds like overkill, or sounds like a lot. Okay, if I'm a service provider, no, it's not, actually. You can support a lot of customers on a single platform. If I'm an enterprise, yeah, probably not going to use 256 virtual portals. What we see out there, 10 or 12 in the enterprise, but the capacity and the flexibility is there if you need it. Again, I talked about the 128,000 concurrent users. And you're going to see an example of this, if you go to our website. I think I have a couple of case studies in here today. But even if this is something like 18,000, 20,000, 25,000 concurrent users, or it's 10,000 users on a day-to-day basis, but it's up to 30,000 potentially during some sort of business continuity event, the platform has the ability to do that. The other thing that it has the ability to do with such a high capacity, right, is we talked about things like, yeah, you've got all your internal users, but you also have guest users, you have contractors, you've got partners, and it begins to stack up. And so if you want to have, as an enterprise, a centralized remote access strategy, you're actually going to need quite a bit of capacity if you're going to settle on one platform that meets your needs as an enterprise, and then be able to host all these different users that are going to be using it for different purposes. And again, range of access methods, right? So we have the layer 3. That's kind of that, if you're familiar with the, the IPsec, right? This was the layer 3 network level connectivity where, the endpoint becomes a part of the network, and it's just the same as connecting to the LAN. That's the same experience you're going to get, right? But you have the layer 7, the web portals. A lot of times people like to use this type of thing, right? When it's, let's say, an extranet partner or something of that nature, you don't really want them on the network, but you want to give them access to particular resources, and web-based access is particularly good for that, right? And we also have kind of that client-server-based thing where you open up a network-level connection, but it's only opened up for the purpose of supporting a specific application, so specific resources for, let's say, an unmanaged device or things of that nature. So that's Access Direct. We talked a little bit about the Desktop Direct, the remote desktop access. So boosts office worker productivity, ensures business continuity, enables mobility while limiting network exposure and simplifying use. So I'm going to talk about this a little bit later as well. I think I have a slide dedicated to it. But one of the reasons that people like Desktop Direct, which I mentioned earlier, is our product that really focuses on remote desktop access, remote access to virtual desktops, virtual applications, things of that nature. The reason people like that is because it doesn't require a network level connection. It allows access to all of your applications and resources, just like as if you were sitting at your desktop or using your virtual desktop. But because it's a thin client, because it's an RDP type session, you're not connected to the network, number one, and number two, any of the data and applications and files that you're working with, they never end up on the endpoint device, right? So it kind of kills two birds with one stone. You don't have to worry about attack because you're not directly connected to the network, and you don't have to worry about data leakage because you're interacting with files, applications, resources, and so on that never end up on that endpoint device. It eliminates data leakage. So people really like that, and that's what you get with Desktop Direct, in addition to a lot of the things that we do for, if you like that strategy and you want to be able to do that, but you want to be able to support a large number of users, the way we implement it for both the IT administrator and for the end user is such that it's so simple that it really allows this type of solution to scale. So that's Desktop Direct. The Motion Pro, I talked about this as Array Networks as client. And it also goes a long way to supporting the secure remote and mobile access that we provide. And you can see here that the client provides, direct connectivity to native applications, through a SDK that we provide, right? So, somebody fires up a mobile app that's tied in with this particular SDK. The VPN tunnel only opens up when the user opens up a particular app on their device, and then only that app directly connects to the VPN gateway. VPNs on demand for native apps, so you don't have to have an open connection to mobile devices all the time. Specific applications can be basically designated so that, hey, you know what, when these apps open, the VPN tunnel goes up to allow for those apps, and again, it limits exposure. HTML5, something that really goes a long way towards eliminating a lot of the headaches of Java and ActiveX and some of the other things that sometimes can kind of throw a wrench in the works in terms of how the client interacts with the operating system, the browsers, and so on and so forth. So through the use of HTML5, you can get a very consistent experience for web apps and solve a lot of problems on the endpoint. And then the secure browser, right? So providing layer 7 access within a mobile environment. And as I mentioned, that's the Motion Pro client. That's downloads for free from the App Store, or Google Play Marketplace, etc. And goes on those endpoints and allows a lot of the capability that I just described. And then finally, the Array Business Continuity licenses. Talked a little bit about it already, kind of outlined it, right? But scalable and affordable burst capacity to meet the demands of planned, unplanned, surge, remote, mobile access, affordable, flexible contingency license certificates. So available in those 10-day denominations and tiered sizes. So triggered. It's seamless. This is the key about it, right? It's like, oh my God, I have an emergency event. Uh-oh, I got to call, get a new appliance, do a configuration, do all these things, and you're like, yeah, it's an emergency condition. It would be better if it was just activated seamlessly, right? So triggered by exceeding the standard user license and may be utilized in consecutive or non-consecutive 24-hour increments. And it really doesn't matter, right? It supports the mix of mobile and remote users. It doesn't matter if your users are on any of those software modules, Access Direct, Desktop Direct, Motion Pro. A user's a user, and the business continuity license applies across the board. And finally, I wanted to touch on the custom virtual portals. I've talked a fair bit about it, but you can see here that you can really define, like, depending on who it is that's logging in, right? So, for instance, on the left-hand side, you can see some internal departments, engineering, finance, but you could have each virtual portal is essentially its own SSL VPN. So each one of these groups is getting full isolation. It's full SSL VPN implementation. It's unique to them and separate and distinct from the others. The portals are customizable to the look and feel and resources needs of each community of interest. And on the right-hand side, you can see some of those external type users that might be on the VPN, partners, guests, contractors, so on and so forth. And again, each portal is fully partitioned and independently manageable. And depending on who these people are, you may want to provide them with different resources, right? So some of them, like a very highly trusted internal user that needs, full-blown network access, you can make an exception for them. Network access, application access, internet only, quarantine for things that are unknown or don't look quite right. You can divert those, quarantine those, get them remediated. Once they're remediated sufficiently, they can be put back in with access to a particular virtual portal designed for things that are perhaps a little bit more questionable. So a lot of flexibility here. And I think you're beginning to see, we've covered a lot of material, and these are just all these things, whether some customers use all of them or a majority of them or some of them, but they're the types of things that really separate the purpose-built SSL VPN or Array from some of the other options. So we'll switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about these key SSL VPN use cases. Again, by no means comprehensive, but these are the ones that that we're seeing out there that we have a lot of experience and that we're seeing fairly frequently, right? So I pulled out the limiting network exposure a little bit. We touched on it a little bit, but it kind of spans a number of different use cases. So I want to touch base on that, but then we're going to talk about enterprise-wide remote mobile access, streamlining the user experience, and also touched on this cloud concept, right? So secure access to public and private clouds. So let's hop in. So limiting network exposure. I'm going to try to explain this infographic here, but I have touched on it, right? What we're seeing is a number of organizations have a strategic direction that actually goes away from network level connectivity. And the good parts about network level connectivity is, yeah, if you've got a very, very good solution with great bandwidth and a platform that's got tremendous horsepower and things of that nature, yeah, it's like sitting at your desk at the office, right? It's like you're connected to the LAN and you have all the freedoms and access and everything just like you were in the office. And that's great. But, you're not in the office. You're external from the office. And you now have this full tunnel through which you can do anything. You can download anything, save anything, print anything, distribute anything, and like people in IT and in the organization are none the wiser. You can sit there as long as you want remotely and plan your attack and launch an attack through that tunnel onto the network, right? So you need a lot of trust for layer 3 VPN, that full network exposure. So what people are doing is they're looking at, well, what are those other options? How can I begin to shrink that? So they're looking at things like the remote desktop, right? Whether that's remote desktop to physical desktops and laptops in the office, or whether that's access to virtual desktops that are sitting in a protected enterprise data center or private cloud, or virtualized applications. And it's that RDP type, thin client type engagement where, yeah, you're not directly connected to the network and the resources never leave the device or the server where they're located, inside the corporate firewall in a secure facility. And you just simply engage with the resources, but you don't have the ability to launch an attack through the network tunnel or to download stuff onto your device, save it, and now you have a data leakage problem. So what people are doing is they're saying, hey, what are these different user groups, and can they be served? Can this user group be served by RDP? Web proxy, again, layer 7, right? You're engaging with a web-based resource or a web-based application. It's not a full network-level tunnel. What user groups can be well served by this? And you begin to kind of work your way backwards and say, okay, you know what? Yeah, we still do have a segment of our user base that has the layer 3 connectivity because they have to and because they're well trusted. But we've taken a lot of steps to limit our network exposure through these capabilities that a product like the Array SSL VPN offers. Enterprise-wide remote and mobile access, and I talked a little bit about this. What you want to do is you want to avoid, especially if you're in a larger enterprise where you've got different remote access products and solutions, popping up in different departments. This department's running this appliance. This department is running this vendor. Oh, for this application, we use this gateway solution. For that application, we use another one. And what happens is you get a very fragmented architecture where you have an opportunity for inconsistencies in policies and things of that nature. A user who's authorized over here is not authorized over here, or one that was supposed to be here, and then you get these things, right, and it becomes, okay, you lose track of it. It's hard to have consistent policies. Next thing you know, there's, kind of cracks in the armor, and you lose visibility to your security policy. So it makes a lot more sense, if you can, to get a very robust, scalable platform where you can centralize your remote access policy. And then you don't have those problems with consistency and cracks and visibility and things of that nature. And so that's something that we do very well. So layer 3 RDP web access from anywhere on any device. You can see our device there, in the middle, and the resources on the back end. And really, it doesn't really matter who the end users are. We can get them all onto the platform, whether it's the small office, home office, remote workers, road warriors, partners, contractors. You name it, they can all be centralized on the platform. And a great example of this is Humana. They've done exactly what I just described, right? So I think everybody's familiar with Humana. They're a large healthcare insurance provider. It's a big organization. They've got thousands upon thousands of workers, but they are hyper stringent in terms of security, consistencies, and things of that nature. So they wanted to avoid that stovepipe secure access for those various use cases, right? It's costly to manage and too prone to inconsistencies and data leakage. And so they did exactly what I described in the previous slide, was they consolidated secure access for local and remote employees, partners, guests on a unified platform, the Array AG series. And the benefit to them was not only with our platform do they get the scalability and the performance that they need, but they get demonstrable accountability for HIPAA compliance, increased productivity for employees, partners, and guests, and also through having a streamlined, centralized approach to secure access, they've tremendously decreased cost and complexity for the organization. Streamlining the user experience. I touched on this a little bit, as I was talking earlier, but one of the things that we find out there is that, I want to access my Citrix virtual desktop. Okay, that's one client, that's one process. Oh, no, today or this other group needs access to just network level access. Oh, that's another process. Oh, I need RDP to Microsoft Terminal Services. Oh yeah, that's through the Microsoft gateway, and that's another process and another client. And as an IT manager and as an end user, multiple clients, multiple processes, multiple infrastructures, it might work for a while. It's not ideal, right? So what you can do with the Array appliances is you can kind of centralize all that, right? You can make within, let's say, a virtual portal, you can make, basically very easy, quick links to VDI desktops, virtualized applications, web applications, Microsoft Terminal Services, network level connectivity, all the different types of file resources, network access, virtual resources. They can all be centralized, within that virtual portal in a very clean, so people don't even really know. They don't even know whether this is an RDP type app or, a client server type app or a web app. It's kind of transparent, right? And we take care of all the back-end connectivity to those different infrastructures. So when the end user logs in, it's one process, it's one client, it's one process, it's simple. They're presented with all of these different resources, and they look uniform, right? You pick the one you want, and it's just better overall for control, consistency, security, ease of use, et cetera, et cetera. So the streamlining that user experience, and that's something that we're seeing more and more of, especially in the enterprise. An example of that is Buckingham Research, financial research and brokerage firm. So what they were finding, and this is actually another facet or another dimension of the previous slide, right? Was they were finding that they had a Citrix Access Gateway, right? And they were finding it was being too expensive and too complex for providing mobile access, again, to a mix of virtual and physical desktops. So in this case, what they had was, they had Citrix virtual desktops that they wanted to make available, to their workers, but they also had a number of physical desktops and laptops that were in their office, and so they wanted to have that single user experience where the user would log into, let's say, the client, and they would say, okay, these are the virtual desktops, these are the physical desktops, and you could click into either one and you could access either one. But the problem was just the way that Citrix implementation was done was that to get the virtual desktops, hey, no problem. That was all engineered end-to-end for Citrix products. But to get the physical desktops rolled in, to have kind of one user experience that allowed access to both, that didn't go so well, right? It was very complex, very expensive. So we actually, with our Desktop Direct product, are actually very efficient at being able to support that single user experience and consolidating those resources all behind one client. And we were able to provide them single intuitive logon for their employees. In this case, the solution was $30,000, right, as opposed to $300,000 that they were looking at with a Citrix solution that was being proposed. We got that up and running in 3 weeks as opposed to an 8-month project. And, hey, one HA pair, right? It's a primary and a DR unit. That was it. And these guys were squared away, and they had a very seamless user experience accessing both virtual and physical desktops. And finally, the last one I want to talk about is, this need to, we've talked a lot about, workers, and, workers need remote access and mobile access, and this is all true. But one of the things we're seeing a lot more of now is that people have put a lot of applications and resources and infrastructure in the cloud, a remote data center, a private cloud, et cetera. And once stuff is sitting out there, then if it's been sold, if these services have been sold to customers, the customers need remote access to get in there and engage with the resources and the services that they've purchased. So they need secure remote access for that. The cloud provider, the infrastructure provider, as a service provider, the cloud service provider, they need remote access to go in and service the underlying network and infrastructure that's supporting their services, and they need remote access for that as well, right? So this concept of remote access to remote data centers, private clouds, secure access for cloud access, this is, we're seeing this more and more. You see a lot of case studies on our website about this, right? So what we're seeing now is, and this is a, it kind of touches on the remote access piece, but also touches on the fact that you can use our products to enable services, right? So this is kind of a use case or a case study of a particular customer. You'll see it on the next slide. In this case, right, so they're using our load balancing product to offer load balancing as a cloud service, and they're offering shared or dedicated load balancing using physical and virtual ADCs, and they've used some of our capabilities to automate with their provisioning, so it's all automated provisioning. But interestingly, what the AG or our SSL VPN enables as part of this solution is the ability to provide secure remote access to infrastructure and services. So it allows the cloud provider administrator to manage internal networks and infrastructure at remote data centers. However, it also gives their customers the ability to manage their purchased services. So a new, I won't say emerging, because actually, we've been doing it for a few years now, but it's new as compared to the more traditional remote mobile access that people probably think about. And this is actually the case study I was talking about, which is SoftLayer IBM, which at this point in time, this is actually, they're now calling it Bluemix, so it's IBM Bluemix. So just as an aside, all of the load balancing services that, when you go to IBM Bluemix and you say, oh, hey, I want to buy load balancing as an infrastructure service, yeah, that's all Array Networks load balancing and app delivery products behind the scenes there that are being provisioned to provide cloud load balancing in the IBM Bluemix environment. But they don't just use our load balancers to provide load balancing as an infrastructure service. They also use our AG series SSL VPN to do exactly what I described, which is providing remote cloud access. So they're a large IaaS cloud provider, probably way more than this by now in terms of the number of data centers, number of countries serviced. Why do they need secure cloud access? It's giving the cloud provider and customer admins the ability to manage infrastructure and services at data centers around the world. And our AG series solution and benefits at each point of delivery, right? So of course there's multiple points of delivery around the world, but a pair of AG appliances at each point of delivery. And again, with those virtual portals and all the stuff I described earlier, getting that full separation between the provider, right? They have their own SSL VPN virtual portal, and then each customer, they have their own SSL VPN virtual portal as well, right? So you get that full segmentation between customers who are needing to access their resources, and you don't want to, mix that up, right? I mean, if you're a provider providing services to enterprise customers on whatever platforms you choose, you have to be able to demonstrate that isolation so that you can demonstrate data security for those customers. And I think this is actually good timing here. I think we've got between 5 to 10 minutes here at the end. And, you can see here just a sampling of some of the customers that I talked about. I mentioned a few of these in some of the case studies, and more case studies on the website. Lots of customers, but I see a sampling of them here. And with that, I am going to check on our questions and answers. Nancy, can you go ahead and read me some of the questions?
Yeah, sure. So the first question is, can we apply MFA to some users and not to others, or is it an all or nothing approach?
That is a great question, actually. I am going to go ahead and say as follows, right? So we talked a lot about virtual portals and virtual SSL VPNs. So let's say that you have community A on virtual portal A. Absolutely. Those users, because each one are essentially their own independent SSL VPN. So for that community, you can mandate that yeah, we need to either use dual-factor or multi-factor authentication for all the users that are in that SSL VPN virtual portal. And for other users in other communities where you know, you don't need that or you don't want that, absolutely, that can be set up to where you know, simple username and login. That I know for sure. We can absolutely do that. You may even be able to, and this one I'm pretty certain, but I can't be 100% certain, that even within an SSL VPN virtual portal that that you can designate certain users as requiring or not requiring the multi-factor authentication. So let me go on here. So there's a couple of questions here that are, I think, just kind of broadly applicable and more housekeeping type questions. So we have the questions around today's presentation and today's the PowerPoint and stuff of that nature. So can you send me the deck from today's WebEx? I want to prep my senior management on some of the topics. Yeah, so absolutely. What we do is the presentation that you saw here today, I generally have PDF this, and you know, at some point within the next hour or two, it doesn't even matter whether you attended or you registered. Registrants and attendees all get a PDF copy of the presentation shortly after the webinar concludes. We also have recorded today's session, so generally, like if you go to our YouTube page, you're going to see that there are a lot of previous webinars out there. Those are actually great for you guys to check out as well if you're interested. But it takes us, you know, a few days, and we'll go ahead and get things edited, and then we'll go ahead and post it and let you guys know that the recording of the webinar there is available, which is great if there are some colleagues that couldn't make it on the call, or you want to share with management, or you just simply want to revisit a couple of things. It's up there. Is there an option to evaluate the product? Okay, so we do this a couple different ways. The easiest one is obviously the virtual appliance or the software. So if you go to our website, you're going to see you know, a big orange button there that says how to try, and I think there's even like a graphic in the middle of the home page that says you know, test drive our product, and it takes you to our download center. And in our download center, you can get the what we call the VXAG, which is the virtual edition of our SSL VPN. You know, and that can be downloaded for, you know, the hypervisor of your choice. And, you know, we get you that free trial license, and you can absolutely begin, you know, playing around and familiarizing yourself with the product, and, you know, see if this is something that you like. You know, and also we do the, you know, the hardware POCs, right? So, yeah, that takes, you know, a little bit more effort, but, you know, hey, if we sit down and you know, there's a project here, there's a need here, and we want to hop into something like a hardware POC, and if that makes sense, that we can absolutely do that as well. Questions just regarding, you know, purchasing direct or through value-added resellers. You know, we lean towards our VARs, right? So, yeah, we like to sell through our resellers, or if you have a particular reseller that you like to buy through, you know, we can make that happen, right? But if you don't and you want, you know, we can recommend a premium partner for you. But truth be told is, you know, we do have some direct customers as well, and that's okay, and where that makes sense, you know, we do support that model. So, however it is that you prefer to purchase, you know, we can make that happen. It's an interesting one, right? So it's how does your solution compare to a VPN solution from a Palo Alto? What do you do better, and so forth? So I think this falls squarely into that category of integrated feature versus purpose-built appliance. And I think everything that I mentioned earlier, you know, still holds true and is still valid, right? If you have a limited use case, just something small, like some little task that you want to use the VPN for, yeah, it can do that, right? But if you are like more, if the situation is more of no, the VPN is a primary or a central or foundational component of this overall use case or project, I don't recommend the integrated feature approach. The reason why is because the firewall has its own job to do, right? It's supposed to be a firewall, and if it's been loaded down to do that, it doesn't have a lot left over to do a very robust SSL VPN. Or if you try, they start impacting each other, and they start to do neither one particularly well, and you don't want that. So you just have to be kind of aware of what you're trying to do. If it's more limited in scope and a little tactical type application, yeah, go ahead. But if it's more robust and it's fundamentally its own project, I would go the path of the purpose-built SSL VPN. Who are your top competitors in this space? So what do we run up against, right? Well, we used to run up against Juniper a fair bit, which brings up another great point and another question that I see here. So yeah, Juniper was basically the closest thing that you could get to an Array SSL VPN purpose-built appliance, and they were our primary competitor, but Juniper divested themselves of their SSL VPN Pulse product line. And so we actually have, if you have a Juniper product, something that's EOL, or you kind of found out about that they're divesting of that product line, and you might be interested in an alternative, when it's time to refresh or to move forward, we have some very compelling incentives and programs for those that want to migrate from a Juniper to an Array platform. So if that's something that might interest some of you, I would definitely inquire with us about that afterwards. So I would say that the Juniper product line was a key competitor. And the truth be told, the other ones we run into are like Cisco, right? They have it on their firewall, or somebody, I don't want to mention, I just mentioned two names, and I don't want to mention names, but people have a smaller, kind of a smaller, more SMB-centric type SSL VPN, and they've kind of bumped up against the limits of that, and that's where we kind of come in and help solve some of those problems. Some easy ones here. Are the user licenses concurrent or named? So they're concurrent, right? Which means you can do some oversubscription, and you just need to kind of sit down and figure out what that is. So obviously, if you buy something like a 100-user license from Array, you can obviously support more than 100 users with those user licenses because they're concurrent, not named user licenses. Do you have a list of multi-factor authentication? So if someone asked earlier about multi-factor authentication. Yeah, we do actually. So we support a pretty broad range. Not going to name all of them right now, but if you go to our website, there's a whole section on our website. It's under the solution section, multi-factor authentication page, and it lists out all the different multi-factor authentication partners that we have partnered with. You can go ahead and check those all out there. And I think we also list them in our data sheet. Can you support both local user accounts and Active Directory accounts? Yeah, absolutely. This goes back to that thing. We're very, very flexible. We actually have, on the platform, I didn't mention it, but I think our local DB supports like 500,000 entries. It's just so ridiculously scalable. So yeah, you can use a local DB on our platform. You can use Active Directory. You can split that up however you want. You can use different authentication schemes, no problem. And the last one here actually is kind of, again, going back to that Juniper replacement program. Just asking if it's still valid, and absolutely it is. And the follow-on question here from the attendee is that if I have Citrix or an F5, do you also have a similar incentive programs for someone who's not a Juniper product? And yes, we do. We ran into that same question. We had a dedicated webinar just for Juniper replacement, and that same question came up there. Would you support a similar type incentive for if I've got a Citrix or an F5? And the answer is yes. Just reach out to us. So, Yancy, do you see any other questions in there?
Nope, nothing.
Okay. Which is actually, I think, pretty gosh darn good time. We went a couple minutes over, but we managed to cover everything and managed to cover all these questions. So that's fantastic. And a good number of you guys on today, so I'm extremely happy about that as well. So with that, we'll conclude today's webinar. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today, and I hope to see you on a future webinar. Thank you.